Hey, I'm Walter Hooker from Bellevue Christian Center. Everyone calls me Hook.
I'm Andy Kaup, also from Bellevue Christian Center, and nobody calls me Hook.
I was in the military for 15 years, and in the 90s, um, I started having some creatinine problems with my annual blood checks. And the first 5 or 6 years, they attributed my high numbers to the fact that I was lifting weights and my muscles were secreting more creatinine than the normal person would. So they just wrote it off as just lifting weights. Well, one doctor in the late 90s said, well, that might be true. That might not be true. So he sent me to a nephrologist and he checked my blood out and said, this is not because of lifting weights. You have some acute kidney failure. So that was in the 90s, and the doctor said, we caught it early, so we're just going to track you. You'll come see me every year. So from the late 90s all the way up till 2020, I was getting a check from my doctor every year, and we were just watching my numbers. I got COVID in December of 2020, and it took my kidneys out. I went to the hospital, and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I missed my anniversary, I missed Christmas, and this was the time where you couldn't have visitors. So I was in the hospital by myself, and my wife was just home not knowing what was going on. Well, they started me on dialysis in the hospital, and my creatinine started getting better because of the dialysis. So they released me on January the 1st, 2021. And I was on dialysis up until the middle of February. Well, let's take you off dialysis and let's see, now that COVID has left your body, let's just see if your kidneys can carry you. Well, in April and May, they checked, and my creatinine had gone back up to 8. And the doctor said, Hook, I got bad news for you. You're going to need to go back on dialysis, and you qualify to be on the transplant list. And that night, when I went home to tell my wife, it was probably the worst night we had ever had because we knew what dialysis meant for the rest of my life. And, we didn't know about getting a kidney and what all that would entail. Every night, I'd hook up to a machine and I'd go through my dialysis 7 nights a week for 9 hours. And then the next month, it went from 7 nights to 5 nights for 9 hours. And then it got down to 4 nights for 9 hours. And then finally, I was down to 3 nights a week for 9 hours. But this was my process every week, and just going to see my nephrologist every month, going to see my care team, social worker, dietitian, a nurse, and a doctor, and they just checking me every month to make sure I was good. So at this point, we got dialysis going in July of 2021. The doctor told me you need to go ahead and start your trying to get on the transplant list. So they gave me a link and they said, this is the link that you give people if they want to see if they qualify to be a donor. And I began my process of qualifying to see if I could receive a transplant.
Initially, when Hook got COVID and went into the hospital, and especially at that time in our world, there was so much uncertainty. Anytime you heard somebody got COVID, you assume the worst, that something bad is happening. Well, then we find out he actually is in the hospital and he's gonna be in the hospital for quite some time. We just didn't know, what does this look like. Are we gonna see him again? I mean, honestly, like, that was some of the processing of, like, what is this doing to his body. And so as we were going through that process, just trying to be in prayer for him and not knowing what exactly he was facing, we just knew that life was changing as a whole. And as he came out of the hospital and there was more clarity around what was going on with his kidneys, what he was going to be facing, whether it be through dialysis or as the process went on through needing a transplant, as a church, we were still doing our best to try to support, doing our best to be in prayer for him. But as an individual, just started processing and saying, God, what role could I play in this? Is there something you have for me in this? Because if there's any way that I can help, I want to. I want to be a part of helping in this. And Hook realizes, okay, I'm going to be in this process of getting on the transplant list. I can share this link with people to see if they're interested. So he shared the link with me, and
And the funny thing was, the way really when I shared the link with you was when I was talking in the office with people and about our blood types. And military people, they all know their blood types. But a lot of civilians, they have no idea what their blood type is. So we're in the office talking to people, and they said, I don't know what my blood type is, so I don't know if I can give. And Andy came in, and I said, I'm O positive. And Andy said,
I said, I'm O positive. Like,
and so that was where we first looked at each other and just started laughing, because I had talked to no one that was O positive or even knew what their blood type was. So that's when I gave you the link, and we just started hilariously on this journey of what if,
yeah, yeah. Because even as we filled out the link, as I started in on that process, we didn't know what that meant. All we, my wife and I, all we knew is we're exploring the possibility of this. We knew we were a blood type match, but we also knew that that's just one piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. That there's a million other little things that have to match for this thing to work. Eventually, got a call that said, okay, your history's looking good. We know that you're a blood type match, but we'd like to bring you in for some more extensive kind of testing. And
every time you take one step further, we just right. sense that wouldn't it be great? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great if God would do that for us, do that for me, and allow Andy to be a blessing to me? So we resisted with everything in us not to get ahead of God.
But with each and every test, it was like, I'm a match tissue type. I'm a match for the size. I'm a match. Like every box was being checked that I was a perfect match, not just a few things lined up, but that I was a perfect match for Hook in this process. And as our family started to process that this is becoming real, you really have to kind of stop and go, okay, are we ready for this? We got to really ask ourselves, is this something that Andy wants to do, or is this something that God is leading us into? And as we processed, which takes time, a lot of conversation happening as a family, but as we processed, we really sense this is something that God is leading us into, that God is orchestrating, that it's His story that we get to be a part of. And there's no greater honor than to be a part of the story that God is writing. And when you sign up to be a part of whatever story God's writing, you just kind of say, all right, God, whatever character you want me to play, whatever role it is you have for me, then I want to be in for that. Yeah. And I think God in His grace gives us opportunities to make good on what we've said we want to do. Yeah.
We wanted it, but we say, ain't no way. There's just
right.
There's
too good to be true.
This is too good to be true that my donor would be my boss and my friend, and for years, and we said, no, God, you would have to do this. There's no way that the med center would look at the two of us and it would be a match. And the other thing that was deep in my heart, which is a backstory to all of this, back in 2019. Andy and I interviewed to be the head pastor at Beverly Christian Center. Our pastor was retiring, and we were the two candidates for the position. And the board decided that Andy would be the nomination to the church for the next pastor. And at Bellevue, we had some racial challenges, and we had some generational challenges because I'm 60-some and Andy's 30-some. So the older people just didn't appreciate that dynamic. And some of the Black people who had known me to be at the church for 20-some years, they just did not appreciate how that looked. So the church and Andy and I, we had to go through some things. But all through this, I'm thinking, God, what if you would do this for healing in our church? As it became more clear that Andy was on this path, I said, God, wouldn't it be so great for our church to see that you were at work all the way back in 2019 on my behalf, on the church's behalf, and using Andy to be a blessing in that. So I had nothing but joy from the middle of April. I think we found out in April up until August when we had the transplant. I just couldn't believe, you hear about these stories, but just to be a part of seeing God do something so miraculous, not just for me, but for my church. for my church and for my city, because many people knew, they knew Andy and I, they knew what was going on at Bellevue, and to see how God had his hands in it from the very beginning, my reactions was nothing but joy. The nephrologist doctor came in, and as we were meeting all these different people, he came in and sat down. He says, "How you doing, Mr. Hook?" I said, "I'm doing great." He says, "Well, I just want you to know I've been praying for you." And I said, "Huh?" I have no idea who this man was. And he says, "Yeah, we've been praying for you." I said, "How do you know me?" He says, "Well, my pastor has presented it to our board and our church 2 months ago, and we've been praying for you consistently since then." And he didn't know that he was going to be my doctor, and I had no idea who he was. But that just shows God's hand. That's the comfort and confidence we had in this whole thing, is that I'm sitting down with my nephrologist doctor who's going to be with me for the next 6 months to a year through this process, and he has been praying for me. And that's the thing about this that just helped us know it was God. This whole city has been involved in this. Pastors and church members have just been praying for us and asking us how we're doing. It just, I could not imagine it feeling better. Not just our church, but the Big C church in our city has been praying for us.
All right. Yes, we have some fears. Yes, we have some uncertainties and some worries, but we don't want to miss what God is doing, and we want to be able to help. We want to be a part of the story if we can, and just be able to see God glorified through all of this. To be able to point back and say, look what God did in Hook's life, in my life, in our church. Like Hook said, got a chance to sit down in the office together and share the news and just to be able to, in that moment, celebrate together. Mm-hmm. This is what God is doing. August arrives,
yeah,
and it was like, what time are you supposed to be in? Well, I'm supposed to be in at 6 in the morning, yeah. B2, and going to start with me, and they're going to remove this kidney, and as they're closing me back up, they're going to take this kidney right over to him, and they're going to insert this kidney into his body,
yeah. And when you wake up, everything's done. I can honestly say I felt better in that moment than I had felt the last 2 years. With all the pain from the medication and everything, just knowing that I had a new kidney and that all the stuff I'd gone through in dialysis was behind me, and I had the capability of a fresh new life. It was so great. I talked about how great the moment was when Andy and Michelle told me that they were my donors. Even greater than that was when I was able to walk and I went down to Andy's room. And there was no more talking to be done. It had been done. I had Andy's kidney in me. And we're in the hospital, and he's laying there in bed and in pain. I'm in pain. We're in pain. And I just go over to his bed, and I just look at him, and I just could not control my emotions because of what he had done for me. And like I said, I was already experiencing a new health and new life, and I was squeezing his hand. I grabbed his hand and just was thanking him. And
he had a hold of my IV, was squeezing my IV. I was trying to, as politely as possible, say, "Hey, I'm gonna need you to let go of that. That's important there."
It was one of the highlights of my life when we got to see each other for the first time after the transplant. I am doing better than I have in a lot of years. My doctor says my numbers are better than they've been the last 20, 30 years of my life. My creatinine numbers just doing great. I had not worked out for 2 years, not walked. I hadn't cut my grass, edged my lawn. I've done all of that since August the 4th. I'm going to the gym, walking. I'm back at work, just feeling incredible.
Feeling great as well. I think the biggest thing was just adjusting. Like, my body needed to adjust to this new way of life, and that took a couple weeks. It was just energy was hard to come by. But by this point, I really do feel kind of back to 100%. Same, I'm able to get back into the gym and work out and just be active again.
that this was about more than about me and Andy.
Mm.
It was about our church. This was so healing, and God was so faithful to Bellevue Christian Center in our city. And that is the thing that I learned, that sometimes in life we think stuff is about us. And you know, when you're sick and ailing and going through stuff, it becomes about you. But when you step back, when God allows you to step back, or after everything has happened and He begins to show you His hand in so many areas of this. And there's all other kinds of stories we can tell you about how God used this
Yeah.
relationship, this journey. God is just incredible. He is incredible. And He uses the bad times in our life just like He uses the good times for His glory.
One of the greatest lessons, or just things that I feel like is God's revealed to me about His nature, His character, is just that God is absolutely the greatest author of any story ever. I mean, there is no detail that He overlooks. There is no tension that He can't bring resolution to. There's no situation that is so far gone or so hopeless that He can't pen a new ending to. And even in the midst of the challenges that we shared about, the things that we were facing as a church, whether it be the racial tensions that we experienced in the church, or the generational challenges, or even just the just the relational divide that kind of took place, God was penning something in the midst of that. And then to see the health challenges arise, God was penning something in that. And I think if I could encourage anybody, it's just, you need to know that God is the author of your story, and that He's writing something special, something that if you'll just trust Him with, it's a greater story than you could ever come up with on your own. And sometimes, you know, being the I want to charge ahead kind of guy, I want to write the story, or I think I have this perfect ending in mind, and God says, no, just trust me with it, and let me take care of the details. Let me write the story, because He truly is the greatest author of any story ever. So